Welcome back, students. I want to talk a little bit about sex and gender this week. I'm just going to do a really brief introduction. You should be reading your sex and gender book. Most of what's outlined in the book, they say it a lot better than what I can in the video lecture, so please be sure you're reading that. And then also you have 2 videos to watch this week that are longer films on intersex individuals and also transgendered individuals. And again, those stories are much more powerful told by the individuals than as by me. So we're going to keep things really short, and I'm just going to introduce a couple of things. So let's go back to this map and introduce what determines sex. So we've already talked about chromosomal sex. In humans, it's an XY system. We've already talked about indifferent fetal sex and that bipotential gonad that starts to change at about 8 weeks and either becomes an ovary or a testy. Okay, that differentiated fetal sex, fetal hormonal sex. Okay, and then from there, we can see this figure gets a lot messier. So I introduced just a little bit to you about some of the hormones that are at play at puberty and kind of what that means to feminize or masculinize a skeleton, muscle mass, fat deposition, and all of those features that characteristically make someone look male or female. But I want to talk a little bit about this term gender. We haven't really used it yet. Okay, and that's really going to make a difference whenever you're watching these videos. So let's actually introduce that first. So what is gender? Gender really has 2 kind of textbook definitions. So one, we can think of gender as an individual experience. Okay, what gender do you identify as? That's very personal. That's all about you and kind of what's going on with your life and your point of view and your experience. So that's your sense of self. And it can be driven by marital relationships. It can be driven by sexual desires, maybe who you're interested in, males, female, both, neither. Okay, also feelings, and then really, how you display or present yourself. Okay, and that kind of leads and blends in a little bit more as gender as a social construct. So that's going to vary from culture to culture. Okay, and that's going to be things that we see more in a society or a group, like are there divisions of labor? Are there certain jobs that are female dominated or male dominated, or that maybe one sex does or does not do? Is there going to be some type of family division? Okay, does someone do all the cooking and the cleaning? Does someone do all of the child rearing? Does someone work outside the home? Okay, and then also, physical dress and things like that. So are there traditional outfits or things that are socially acceptable? So those kind of play off of one another. So how you view yourself and then how society views the group. So I just want to introduce the 2 videos because there's going to be some interesting things in there that touch on differences in sex and then also differences in gender. The intersection documentary is featuring people that are intersex. Now, what does that mean? So intersex is kind of this umbrella term. It's anyone that has ambiguous genitals, secondary sexual characteristics that don't fit the norm. Maybe they have chromosomal variations. So not just X or Y, but what if they're XXY? That can happen. Are their hormone levels different? Are they a woman with really high testosterone? No. So intersex is going to be more of an umbrella. They will include people like the individuals with androgen insensitivity syndrome, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and wavidoses. But again, you'll get introduced to some other ones like Klinefelter syndrome, which is more chromosomal, and some other things as well. Then I'm going to have you watch the Jazz Jennings story. So there's a couple clips on her. she has basically become the transgender poster child. She is becoming more and more popular. I have to introduce her less and less as this course evolves. And she is diagnosed with what is known in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual as gender identity dysphoria. Okay, this is someone that has cross-gender identification. Again, the term that you're probably more familiar with is transgender. Okay, she has discomfort with her current sex. She believes herself to be the other sex. You'll hear Jazz describe herself as having a girl brain in a boy body. What is really important, there is no underlying physical intersex complication. Okay, so people with gender identity dysphoria and intersex are two separate populations. Get that clear. Okay. And you'll have a study guide with you to watch the videos because they are quite long. So I want you to stay engaged and make sure you're answering some of those questions along the way about what is physically or chromosomally different about these intersex people. How do they feel about it? How does that translate to, idea of gender and social situations? Okay. And then also looking at Jazz's story, there'll be some other things I want you to think about more, her reproductive fertility and how that's going to impact later in life. All right, I just wanted to put this slide up. This is the Pink and Blue Project because you did read this in your textbook, the Sex and Gender book. However, your book is in black and white, so you probably didn't get the full effect of the Pink and Blue Project. So, whenever we talk about gender and there being objects or expectations or things kind of associated with one another, it sounds a little bit silly to say that objects can be gendered. But looking at this picture, I think it makes a little bit more sense. So I just wanted to put that here for you in full color so that you could see this little girl, and a lot of the products that are purchased for little girls or available for purchase are pink. They're dollies, they're shoes, they're clothes, kitty cats, things like that. And then we've got our little boy over here, and all of his things are in blue. And he's got a bicycle in there, and he's got blocks and things like that. And I don't know, it seems a little odd that these toys are gendered. And whenever we dig a little bit deeper, a lot of this is just a marketing scheme. Okay, there aren't girl toys or boy toys. They're just marketed to you as such, so you'll spend twice as much money if you have two children of differing sexes. So be careful with that. All right, then I want to go back and talk about kind of how much can we change and when. So this is in reference to someone with gender identity dysphoria or someone that is transgender. Okay, so I want you to think about this whenever you're watching Jazz's story, and then I'll have you do a discussion board on it as well. So let's start with kind of an interesting in-between case, the pregnant man. The pregnant man was very famously on Oprah. Okay, and this person is what we would describe as a gender variant. This person has transitioned from female to male. So what this person was able to do was, after they had gone through puberty and into adulthood, this person chose to take testosterone therapy. And that was going to masculinize some parts of the body. Remember, the skeleton is pretty much set at this point, but we can start to grow facial hair, we can change our muscle mass, maybe our fat deposition a little bit, and look a lot more masculine. But what this person did not do was undergo any sort of surgical intervention on their external and internal genitalia. So this person that had been taking testosterone and presents with their secondary sexual characteristics as masculine still has a fully functioning uterus. And all that needed to be done was just to stop the testosterone so that it didn't affect the fetus, Okay, and the uterus is still intact. Eggs have been produced at birth because this person was female at birth, and this person was able to successfully carry a pregnancy. Okay, I'm going to leave this question of sexuality for another lesson. Okay. But what I want you to think about whenever you're doing the discussion board this week, what is the difference in reproductive consequences for someone like, let's say, Caitlyn Jenner, who transitioned very late in life and has adult children and has already reproduced, or someone like the pregnant man, which was kind of in between, started to transition but didn't go down a road to completely alter reproductive organs and was able to father children. And then someone like Jazz Jennings, right? Jazz Jennings, in the video you're going to watch, she is 11 years old. She's right on the cusp of that puberty. So she has full range to kind of play with her hormones under, clinical guidance, obviously. But she can actually feminize her skeleton before it starts to masculinize. She can change her levels of fat deposition, her muscle mass. Okay? But if she takes those hormones early enough to affect the skeleton and those secondary sexual characteristics, things like the gonads are not going to get a chance to develop properly. So that's something we really need to think about. Okay? So it's really a big trade-off here, whether you do the transition before or after puberty and to what extent, because fertility is definitely going to be impacted. So I want you to think about that. I'm not going to give you 100% of the answer just yet, and please discuss that out amongst yourselves.